Hello everybody, welcome back. It's time to talk about Lorcana Set 6, Azurite Sea. I've been working a ton on early playtesting and deck building, so stay tuned over the next couple days for some deck list videos. I promise they are on the way starting tomorrow even, so make sure to tune into that. But today, let's start by diving in and taking a look at what I believe are the top 10 cards in the Azurite Sea expansion. This new set is super exciting. I feel like I say this at the beginning of each set, but it really does feel like we're getting some fun new tools this time around. Yes, some of the previous top decks are simply getting more great cards that will likely keep them strong, but we also have a surprising amount of new cards that have potential to unlock new deck archetypes and enable new strategies that can shake things up. I love when new decks are viable competitively, but I also just love creative deck building, both in meta and off meta, and this set certainly delivers in that regard. Before we jump into the top 10, let's briefly talk through some honorable mentions. More specifically, here are 3 cards from each ink color that are now new staples moving forward. These are cards that should be considered when building decks this set. All of these fall short of my top 10 list, but these are cards you will be seeing when playing in Lorcana Azurite Sea. In Amber, we have Dale, Friend in Need, Tiana, Restaurant Owner, and the song I Won't Give In. These are a bit more niche than a true staple card that could exist in any deck, but all of these are solid new Amber cards, especially in aggressive decks. In Amethyst, we have some of the strongest honorable mentions with Diablo, Obedient Raven, the White Rose, and Tinkerbell Fast Flyer. These really are great new character staples that almost pushed their way into the top 10. In particular, Diablo has become an instant Amethyst classic already. In Emerald, Hero Inventors Fred and Gogo Tamago help Emerald's aggressive game plan, and Gazelle Angel with Horns is flexible, providing evasive for either protection or defense. Keep her in mind as an effective tech choice in Set 6. In Ruby, Moana Self-Taught Sailor is going to find her way into many decks as a solid 1-drop. Scar Heartless Hunter is a risky choice that can also be ultra powerful at the right moment. And Gold Coin might be my number 1 sleeper pick this set. I think it's extremely underrated as a new 1-cost item in item decks, and maybe a few wacky aggro decks as well. In Sapphire, I gotta shout out the new Alice, Savvy Sailor. She's my pick for number 11, and I could see her moving up into the top 10 with more time and testing. Alice joins 2 other exciting Sapphire characters, Pleakley and Yokai, and seriously, almost every Sapphire card has a really interesting and unique effect in Azurite Sea. Finally, in Steel, we have 3 more characters. Calhoun is a strong 2-cost option who, although she is competing with something as strong as Smee, is no doubt going to find her way into a few decks. Gantu Crankyhead is also here. With stats like that, he's straight up one of the best vanilla cards available. And the new Wreck-It Ralph also deserves a mention. His cost is steep, but I'm excited to build around this card and see if it has any potential. Alright, with all those honorable mentions out of the way, it's time to get into my top 10 cards of Set 6. And we're going to start off things a little spicy, because these first 3 cards, numbers 10, 9, and 8, are cards I think have been significantly overlooked going into the set. I haven't seen much buzz around these picks, and yet I think they have potential to be extremely powerful and surprise a lot of players. Let's start with number 10, Pluto Guard Dog. This is a 4-cost inkable steel character, a Storyborn ally with 1 strength, 5 willpower, and 1 lore. This guard dog does have bodyguard, as you may expect, but he also has plus 4 strength when he has no damage on him, making him an effective 4-cost 5/5. This is similar to another steel character, Lawrence, who becomes a 3-cost 4/4 before taking damage. A 5/5 for 4 is a great stat line. We've seen over the last set or 2 how good Lawrence can be, but he was a slow burn. Players took a while to pick him up. I think Pluto might be in a similar situation. Pluto does have less lore than Lawrence, but he does have bodyguard. This results in him being less effective than Lawrence overall, I think, as the difference between 3 and 4 cost characters in Lorcana is huge. You must make a significant jump in power and impact to stay relevant. That being said, I do think Pluto fits nicely into certain decks because of his own strengths, and he's actually my top steel card in Azurite Sea. Pluto works paired with Sapphire nicely. You can ramp into him early, or better yet, use him as a bodyguard later on. He can function in low-to-the-ground aggro decks as well, like Amethyst as a top-end bodyguard, serving as a tough-to-defeat defender. And in Amber, he protects questers and singers, and can easily hold damage for Rapunzel heals. I compared him to Lawrence, but because of the bodyguard keyword, Pluto is also comparable to Chin Po. Pluto comes out earlier at a lower cost, and although the 4 cost versus 5 could be considered a downside, as he can't sing a whole new world, I think this new set pushes us even further towards worldless Sapphire Steel decks, for example, with the inclusions of cards like Oswald and Yokai that can find and cycle the 1-cost items. At the end of the day, a beefy 4-cost bodyguard is a welcome addition. Overall, Pluto isn't a super flashy character, but he is one who I could see doing some heavy lifting moving forward. Next up at number 9, we have Heffalumps and Woozles. This is a 2-cost inkable emerald action and song that says, chosen opposing character can't quest during their next turn. Also, draw a card. This is a deceptively simple action. It reminds me of When Will My Life Begin from the last set, which I think is a great song that has been overlooked. It's also an early inkable song that draws a card. When Will My Life Begin prevents an opposing character from challenging, while Heffalumps and Woozles prevents questing. Anti-challenging is great for protecting your aggro characters or locations, but here in Emerald, preventing questing is also very useful. This prevents rival aggro characters from questing, of course, but it also shuts down a lot of Sapphire characters. Hiram Flaversham wants to quest to draw cards, so this is a welcome addition to Emerald, which is a color that, on its own, struggles to take out Hiram before he quests. This song also prevents Tamatoa from questing, shutting down his late-game lore potential and his ability to quest to grab back items from the discard easily. Heffalumps and Woozles also, just in general, feels more impactful in Emerald compared to Steel songs that draw cards, because card draw in Emerald is quite a bit more scarce. Couple that with the fact that 2-cost Emerald characters like Ursula Deceiver, and perhaps now Go-Go Tamago, are common inclusions that would rather sing this than quest most of the time. Overall, this is a solid choice that certainly feels at home in Emerald, disrupting your opponent's plan with a bit of an annoyance. I'm glad this time around the effect feels healthy and fair. On to number 8 now, we have another underrated pick. This is Lose the Way, a 2-cost inkable amethyst action. When you play it, exert a chosen character, then you can choose to discard a card in order to lock that character down so they can't ready at the start of the next turn. Set 1 gave us Freeze, which was a completely unplayable card, but its ability to exert an opposing character was an interesting idea. But as a 2-cost action and uninkable, it just wasn't enough. Then Set 2 introduced I'm Stuck. It was cheaper and inkable, and locked down an already exerted character. Again, this card saw pretty much 0 play. It's a lot better than Freeze, but not enough to be meaningful. So here we have Lose the Way, and this just might be a 3rd card destined to gather dust in your bulk box, but I think the fusion of Freeze and I'm Stuck, all wrapped up in a discounted 2-cost, might be exactly what we need. This may end up being a dud pick for my top 10, but I think there's a lot more here than what it appears. The ability to lock down a character for a full turn could yield the same results as if you had just removed that card for 2 ink. This is especially true towards the top end of an aggro deck that just needs to quest out that one more turn for the win. In those scenarios, this card is great at freezing your opponent's response to your board. Or perhaps this card finds a spot in a more control-oriented deck. After all, it is very similar to Elsa, Spirit of Winter, which at times her ability has proven itself to be very effective. I haven't had the opportunity to try out Lose the Way a ton yet, but I look forward to cooking with it, and I have no problem including it here on the list. Next up we have number 7, Simba Pride Protector. He's a 5-cost uninkable amber character, a hero, prince, and floodborn character who can shift in for 3 ink. Simba has 4 strength, 4 willpower, and quests for 2 lore. At the end of your turn, if Simba is exerted, you may ready all of your other characters. Right off the bat, because of that powerful ability, shifting Simba in is a great way to use him, since he can immediately quest, sing, or challenge, turning sideways and untapping everyone else on board at the end of the turn. Simba's best shift targets are the 2-cost Amber Simba Protective Cub and the 1-cost Steel Simba Future King. Keep the Ruby Simbas in mind too though, such as the Simba Scrappy Cub. As a shift 3 5-cost character in Amber, he's immediately a contender for a Steel Song deck, replacing or complementing Robin Hood as an early shifter ready to sing songs right away. He fits right into this deck's game plan, acting as a protector for a full board of characters. After all, Steel Song loves to spam the board with Cinderella, Piglet, Smee, and so on. Simba's ability to turn these guys to safety is essentially a bodyguard ability, but one that can't be bypassed simply by taking down Simba first. This really is an effective way to protect characters. Also consider the fact that 4 strength and 4 willpower is a fantastic stat line in Lorcana. This is much preferred over the stats we typically see on a 5-cost Floodborn like Robin Hood or Sad Beast. That 4 strength makes it much harder for Ruby to remove Simba with Brawl, Medusa, or Sisu. Everything I just said so far about Simba is pretty obvious, so I won't spend much more time here. Any Floodborn with good stats and a great ability is gonna see some play. The only thing holding him back is the fact that he's uninkable. However, I personally think his readying ability is worth it. I think it's really good, maybe even better than we realize. It's certainly enough to propel him into the meta, so keep an eye out for Simba in the Azurite Sea. Moving on to number 6 on our list today, we have Genie Wish Fulfilled. Genie is a 4-cost uninkable Amethyst character, a Storyborn ally with 2 strength and 4 willpower who quests for 2. Genie also has Evasive, and when you play him, you may draw a card. Here is, once again, another strong 4-cost character in Amethyst. The easiest comparison is with Merlin Rabbit, of course. As a 4-cost uninkable that draws a card when played, Genie immediately guns for Rabbit's spot in decks, trading off the second draw when leaving play for an extra lore pip and the evasive keyword. If you want more aggression in your Amethyst deck without losing a lot of the card draw power, Genie is the choice. And if your deck relies less on the bounce package, Genie is also the clear favorite. Genie Wish Fulfilled also feels great when paired with Sapphire. You can play him out on turn 3 easily, and his evasiveness allows him to hit Diablo, so getting him out early with his 4 willpower feels great against Emerald Steel. There was once a time when Surfer Mini was an absolute beast in Ruby Amethyst, and now we have the same card in Amethyst itself with Tinkerbell Fast Flyer. The 1/3 evasive stat line has suffered in more recent sets, thanks to the uptick in Small Sisu and Brawl. And although Genie is also an easy target for Brawl, I still feel like he feels like a shiny new version of Surfer Mini. And because of that, Genie has room for consideration, especially in aggressive lists. Plus, even if Brawl ruins his day, he does draw a card when he's played, so there's at least a strong consolation prize. If there's anything we've learned in the first 5 sets of Lorcana, it's that card draw is king. Alright, it's time to break into the top 5, and this first card is a bit of a wild card. It's You Came Back. You Came Back is a 2-cost uninkable emerald action that very simply readies a chosen character. I adore this card. Not only is it a great moment in one of Disney's best animated movies, the ability to ready a character is so good. I've loved this power since set 1. I often say LeFou Instigator is my favorite card in Lorcana because of his ability to ready up another character. But cards like LeFou and Shield of Virtue always come with a downside. You can challenge afterward, but you cannot quest. So these are used for challenging or just protecting characters until the next turn when they can quest again. But now, this time around, we get an upgrade. You Came Back finally gives us some juicy quest twice per turn options. I want to use this with Piglet, Belle, or Gantu for a ton of lore, or even bring back something like Cusco in Emerald, who comes with Ward, even better. But this card also benefits from characters who can activate abilities when they quest. Among many, some notable targets for You Came Back are Goofy, Alice, Doc, Robin Hood, Tamatoa, and even Sapphire Mufasa, who has some pretty crazy potential here, readying your Inkwell more than once per turn. Now, to be fair, I do think this combo is pretty far-fetched, but my point is to acknowledge the ceiling of potential here. You Came Back appears like a simple card, but in practice it can be very powerful. One major reason why I'm so hot on this card is because it's flexible. You Came Back is decent paired with aggro ideas, but it also functions as a combo piece or a defensive card in many scenarios. I already have several decks built out that include this card, including a deck guide that I'll be dropping very soon, so stay tuned for that. For now, let's get to our number 4 card. At number 4, we have Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. This is a 2-cost uninkable Sapphire character, a Storyborn hero with 2 strength, 1 willpower, and 2 lore. During your turn with Oswald out on board, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an item, you may play that card for free, exerted, otherwise it goes to the bottom of your deck. When this card was first revealed back during the D23 gift set, I think we all knew it had the potential to be powerful, but it was hard to judge exactly how relevant it would be, especially with other 2-cost Sapphire characters like Tipo and Chica, and even Scuttle, who, to be fair, does rival Oswald very specifically as a turn 2 item scouting character. But now that we've had some time to test Oswald, it's clear that his ability to cheat out items for free is incredibly powerful. Of course, this is in part due to how good it can be to have a free lucky dime on turn 3 or 4, so part of this power does involve some luck. You do have to ink and hope that you hit the right card. But this is the Lucky Rabbit after all, and even hitting an item card like Popsicle or Fortisphere feels nice. It's a free draw when they're played that also sets up your items for Hiram or Tamatoa. Hitting a Fishbone Quill off Oswald also feels pretty valuable. Being able to ink twice in a turn, which Sapphire has been known to do, does proc this Oswald's ability twice in one turn. That is fantastic, especially since we know cycling through your Sapphire deck to find Lucky Dime is already a winning strategy. That's why a card like Vision of the Future has become such a classic staple already, even after just one set. So even if Oswald is cycling your non-items to the bottom of your deck, you're still finding your dime even sooner, which makes Ruby Sapphire and Ruby Steel item decks even more deadly. Add on the generous bonus of Oswald having 2 lore, and it gets even more conveniently powerful. After all, your goal most of the time is to find Lucky Dime early, and Oswald himself already provides a decent dime target as you do so. I don't think it's a coincidence that Oswald the Lucky Rabbit works so well with your Lucky Dime. Now, I think the main downside of Oswald is that he does compete with other important turn 2 ideas in Sapphire, like Tipo, One Jump Ahead, and Sail the Azurite Sea. In a lot of different games and matchups, those cards are going to be way more valuable than Oswald. Also, our Lucky Rabbit incentivizes playing more than 2 Lucky Dimes, which means adding at least 4, but potentially 8 new uninkables into certain Sapphire decks. There's a lot of competing ideas and play sequences here, which does complicate the way these decks are built and played, including adding a lot of complexity to the mulligan strategy. However, with all that said, the power of Oswald means it's worth navigating all of that, because he brings so much to the table. So much so that he lands up here in the top 4, potentially rising even higher with time. Alright, let's get into the top 3 now, starting with Maui Half Shark. This is a 6-cost inkable Ruby character with 7 strength, 5 willpower, and 1 lore. He's a Storyborn hero deity with evasive as well as 2 abilities. Whenever Maui challenges another character, you may return an action from your discard to your hand. Also, whenever you play an action, gain 1 lore. This card has seen a ton of buzz already, so I'm sure it's no surprise that I've included it here in my top 3. Shark Maui simply has so much packed into one card. 7/5 stat line that's enough to avoid small damage and strength-based removal. His 7 strength is enough to take out almost any character and most locations, and he has evasive, so that makes him even harder to deal with. He is weak to Then Along Came Zeus, plus hard removal like Dragonfire and Let It Go, but those have all taken the sidelines lately. Depending on how much of a menace Maui proves to be, I predict many of these beefier removal cards might need to make a return. In addition to those stats, Shark Maui comes stock with 2 strong abilities that help him synergize with actions. He can grab actions back from the discard by challenging characters. This means grabbing back everything from a Be Prepared that's been discarded, ready to be played out right away once he challenges at 7 ink. Or Maui can bring back a variety of other cards like Friends on the Other Side, or Vision of the Future, or even things like A Pirate's Life or Bare Necessities. Secondly, the real deadly aspect of Maui is that each time an action is played, you gain 1 lore. This means small actions like Develop Your Brain, Fire the Cannons, or Thievery are going to be very interesting in a deck with Maui. It can even be strung together multiple actions in 1 turn for some quick lore gains. Maui should instantly be considered for any existing Ruby decks, primarily Ruby Sapphire, where the endgame Dime lore can be supplemented by the extra from Maui, plus all the actions this deck already wants to play. Ruby Amethyst is also a big contender, of course, especially in a burn deck, which is exactly what I've already built for myself going into set 6. Check out my video on this going up either tonight or tomorrow that breaks down everything you need to know about my Shark burn deck. Now, I do think Maui is going to be harder to fit into lists than people realize, which is one reason why he's my number 3, and not quite at the top like I've seen in other discussions. It's just hard to fit in 4 additional 6-cost characters into decks that are already chock full of effective cards. But I think when Maui does work, it's going to hit hard. And that's why he's my pick for the most impactful Ruby card and legendary card in Lorcana Azurite Sea. Now let's move on to my number 2 card, Lilo Escape Artist. Lilo is a 2-cost inkable amber character, a storyborn hero with 1 strength, 2 willpower, and 2 lore. At the start of your turn, if Lilo is in your discard, you may play her back out on the board exerted. I love this card. It's such a fun new addition with a unique ability that feels super thematic. But Lilo is also simply extremely good. At a glance, this is an aggressive card, questing for 2 of course, and her ability to return every time she's banished means your aggro pressure is kept up turn after turn. Yes, her stats are small, so opponents will be able to deal with her easily, especially when she comes into play exerted. For this reason, some consider Lilo a lot weaker than I do, but for me this isn't always about guaranteed lore. It's about that turn after turn pressure and advantage in the form of opportunity cost and resource costs from your opponent. If your opponent is dealing with her each turn, that means eventually trading a character, or using actions like Brawl or Let the Storm Rage On. And that just means Lilo is back the next turn and your opponent is now down a card, while yours is back in the action. Using actions like that on Lilo isn't a great trade, so most of the time opponents will take down Lilo with a character in a challenge. But again, this is reactive for the opponent, instead of a proactive move towards their own game plan. Because of this, in many games, Lilo is essentially going to read as your opponent loses 1 or perhaps 2 lore each turn. Lore they would have obtained had they been able to quest, instead of responding to the annoyance of Lilo every time. Of course, a lot of this success with Lilo does come from being ahead of your opponent in an aggressive manner. That won't be the case every single game, but it is the game plan you're going for with Lilo. Another reason why I rank this escape artist so high is that she synergizes with a lot of different cards. In a way, she wants to be discarded, so she's an easy pick when you're up against a discard deck and have to discard a card from your hand. She's also a natural pairing with Steel, being discarded by A Whole New World, Doc a Bold Knight, and even Simba Future King. She works well with other ink colors as well, like Emeralds Strike a Good Match, Amethysts Lose the Way, or even something super funky like Li Shang in Ruby. But yes, Steel is the clear winner, and she's an instant staple in all Amber Steel decks moving forward. On top of all of this, Lilo is also inkable, which means she's flexible if needed. But funny enough, you're not going to want to ink her, pretty much ever. What you're really aiming for, and this is what a lot of players are missing, is multiple Lilos in your discard. Having 3 or 4 Lilos returning each and every turn can be simply overwhelming. So yes, her being inkable is nice, but it's also bait, because she's much more powerful in the discard than in your inkwell. If you're still not convinced, you can make a quick comparison of Lilo with Perdita. Perdita has never been a super popular pick, but when she does work and does pop off, it's so good. I'm sure you've seen this in action before, with Perdita returning a card like Piglet or Daisy back to the board. Lilo is like Perdita, except Perdita is a 6-cost uninkable card that requires another card already set up in the discard to combo with. Meanwhile, Lilo works on her own without any other help, and she comes back every single turn without any additional cost or condition. Incredible. Alright, it's time to move on to my number 1 card of Lorcana Azurite Sea, and to absolutely no one's surprise, it's fittingly Sail the Azurite Sea. I won't talk much because I think we've all seen this card already and know it's going to be strong, but Sail the Azurite Sea is a 2-cost inkable sapphire action that allows you to ink a second time this turn, just like Belle, Strange but Special. Sail also draws you a card when it's played. That's a nice bonus, helping keep your hand full even though you're inking a second time. Just like Belle or Fishbone Quill, when you ink that second time, it's ready to go and can be used right away, on the same turn it's inked. Very nice. Sail the Azurite Sea is nothing too flashy and nothing too new, just pure utility and consistency. It's another turn 2 ramp card in Sapphire. We got 1 jump ahead, then we got Tipo, and now we have Sail the Azurite Sea. Up to 12 cards ready to ramp on turn 2 if you wanted to run all of them. The fact that this action is inkable, draws a card, and it isn't a song so it can't be stripped from your hand with Ursula Deceiver means this is a pure upgrade over 1 jump ahead, even if the additional inked card must come from your hand. I think this is an instant must-play staple for Sapphire decks, and it becomes the number 1 turn 2 ramp card even over Tipo. This is because, unlike Tipo or 1 jump ahead, this card is not a brick top deck in the late game. You can play it to simply draw a card, which is very good. If you top deck Sail with 10 ink in your inkwell, you basically just didn't top deck it. You're already on to the next card without even thinking. Go ahead and prepare to add these into Ruby Sapphire as a 4 of, as well as potentially Sapphire Steel, Sapphire Emerald, and Blurple. Turn 2 ramp has never been as consistent as it is right now, and depending on whether you play Sapphire or not, Sail the Azurite Sea is either super awesome or super terrifying. All I can say is I love deck building and I love consistency, so I'm a pretty happy camper. Well everyone, that's all I have for you today. I really appreciate everyone who watched all the way through. Thanks a ton for tuning in. If this video was helpful or entertaining or helped you fall asleep, make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.